Melissa, it's a very scary thing to have an NDE and not have anywhere to turn. I didn't talk about it for over 30 years. I wanted to talk to a therapist, try to tell her what happened, and she shamed me. And then I was like, I didn't talk about it at all after that. I finally worked up the courage to talk to my grandmother when I was 24. And she told me things, and oh, I wish I'd heard it earlier. Oh my gosh.
I'm here today with Lura Ketchledge, and she has had a profound near death experience as well as other paranormal experiences. We are going to dive into her story today.
Well, hi, Melissa, and thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be speaking with you this afternoon.
Likewise, we could start at the beginning, and I love to hear about your life leading up to your near death experience and then what happened with your near death experience.
Well, I always explain that I had like a vanilla life. I was a minister's grandchild, and good gracious, I had just a very middle class upbringing, Presbyterian, just leading a normal, life in America. But the game changer was my near death experience. It took all my beliefs, everything that I was raised in, and all of my foundation just, like a tsunami. It just hit me and it changed everything.
Very interesting. I've heard you talk previously about how you were the last one to expect something like this to
Oh
happen
gosh.
because you loved life, you were happy, you didn't have any
No,
existential crisis. And
no.
so how did your near death experience come about?
Well, at the time, it was in 1979, and this is before the internet. This is before the social media explosion. And if
Mhm.
you were born afterwards, it's like a time warp. I mean, it was just a different world back then. So imagine it set in 1979. I owned had my first apartment. I owned my first car. I had two boyfriends. I can say this now because I'm almost 65. I was a pretty girl, teenager, just experiencing life and just having a great time. So there was no big crisis or anything like that. I was having a happy life. One day, I chose to go horseback riding. My girlfriend stood me up. It was her idea to go. I went out to Centerville, Virginia, stables that I had ridden at many times before, rented a horse. And the funny thing is, I've always been around horses, loved horses, even at a horse farm as an adult. But I am not that great of a rider. I'm just a low intermediate. I haven't had any fancy lessons. And I got on a horse that was, I would say, a little bit more than my abilities. And I teamed up with two fellows that I had just met on the trail, and we decided to race back to the barn. And my horse hit the only gopher hole probably in the field. And the thing is, just before the accident, it was just such a beautiful day, Melissa. And I was loving life, and I was going to be heading for home soon to go to work. I worked at a nightclub. And the last thing I thought about was getting killed. So, as just before I started to fall off the horse, I had this feeling of dread sweep through me, just like like a rush of, I knew something dreadful was going to happen. I knew I was going to fall. I was losing my balance. The horse was stumbling. I was going way too fast. And I catapulted, off the saddle, but I never hit the ground because I left my body. So mercifully, I went into a deep, dark velvet tunnel at a high rate of speed. I left physical reality like that in an instant. And I knew where I was. I knew I thought to myself, I'm dead and it's over. And all of the horror, all of the grief, all of the unlived years just like zoomed through my consciousness, and I was horrified that it was over. I just begun to live. Game over. Didn't expect it. So there aren't words to tell you how bad I felt, or the anguish, or you think about everything all at once, and the grief you feel only about your own demise is just unspeakable. So I left physical reality. My body hit the ground. My body went into a little culvert or ditch lined with rocks, face first. I was wearing a riding helmet, which is probably the only way I wouldn't have been resuscitated without one. But time did not exist the way it exists here. Imagine we have the game of life and we kind of know the rules by 18 or 19. You kind of figure out how things work. Imagine all of that being upended. And you're in a place where there's no roadmap, no guide, no nothing, and the game is different, and it is terrifying. It was for me. Other people can have a blissful death. I didn't. Luckily, at the end of this journey, it was my late grandfather, who I loved and adored, who had died when I was 12 from cancer, a horrible death. And he was fine. And he was there. And he took over. And thank God. Because if anybody else on this planet had greeted me, I wouldn't have believed it. But seeing him and being reunited to him was absolute comfort, joy, and just imagine the person you love most in the world, just seeing them again after they've been dead nearly, what was it, like 8 or 9 years? So that was pretty intense, pretty intense.
Wow.
A lot happened after that. It's hard for me to, I'd like to say, I know all the answers. No, I don't. I've got more questions at the end of the day, but I can tell you what happened to me and how things are so different in non-physical reality.
Mhm.
William Buhlman, who is a much more experienced person than me, and it was a teacher at Monroe, I read his books, and he gave me words to articulate.
Mm.
Imagine this is physical reality. This thin little hand is physical reality. And from here on to whatever is the non-physical dimension, which is so much bigger. So we're on the crust of it. And as you go in to non-physical reality, each layer, each dimension is more thought responsive until you get to source. So everybody's journey, I think, is very different. What did I need to learn when I had an out-of-body near-death experience? I needed, I guess, to see my life, or the life I thought I had, and it was nothing. When you're a teenager, the world revolves around you and you think you know everything. Well, it's humbling. It's really humbling because how little I knew. Every kindness you do means something, has a greater value. Every rotten thing you do that interferes with somebody else's life, not your own, is a much bigger event than you can comprehend. So let's say you're a pretty good person. Most of us are trying our best. We're not we're not Hitler. And you're trying your best, but you really slight somebody, or you snub them, or you do something that was just really not too cool. You're going to feel from their point of view what it was like. So this is not like a judgment day that you go through it all. There wasn't any biblical connotations to my near-death experience except the feeling of love later. But this is basically, you judge yourself. You're not judged by others. You judge yourself and you think, I could have done better in this instant. I wish I had done more. Or like when I saved a cat one time from getting hit by a car, that was a particularly good thing. And I felt the joy and the goodness of it. So you do have an accounting or a review of your life or whatever you want to call it. It goes very fast, but each event is separate. And that's not a great way to explain it, but that's how it kind of works. But there's more, but let me let you talk for a minute. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So, you met your grandfather, right? And did he's say anything to you, for lack of a better terminology?
Yeah, I talked to my grandfather. He said some things that were deeply personal that I've never
Mhm.
shared with anyone. More family matters, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So, you said that it was really wonderful to see him after so
Oh, and
long.
he had the bluest eyes. Oh my God. And you know what? My hearing, my vision was so much better, bigger, more pronounced. And it's not like I heard him talk to me, but he didn't move his mouth. I guess it's telepathy, but I heard his voice, but I didn't see him use his vocal cords or really move his lips. And it felt even more natural than it does you and I conversing.
That's amazing. So he somehow must have projected his voice into your mind, the sound of his voice.
I don't know, but it was very talking to him, seeing him. And you know, the thing is, I was still me.
Mhm.
I still had my hands, my legs. I was still me. I was still 19. I think saw my hair being blonde still. Yeah, I was still me. I still felt like me. I didn't feel like, being a ghost or anything, a point of consciousness at that point. But, when you're a kid and you hold the hand of your grandparent or your dad, and they seem to have very big hands. But I remember holding his hand and he still had big hands, even though I was an adult. And later on, I talked to my mom and she said, yes, my father had very large hands and his eyes were so freaking blue. And he just, grabbed my hand and just sort of lifted me. And it was just wonderful and emotional. A lot of crying, not from him, but from me. He seemed more calm and reserved and in control. And he was okay. He didn't have the anguish of cancer or pain anymore, which it's a really much better way to remember him than when I saw him dying.
Oh, yeah, so that's gotta be so comforting knowing that he is doing so much better now, and for other people listening who may be wondering about your loved ones who have passed.
I think so. At least it was for me. Geez,
Mhm.
I wasn't equipped for this. I hadn't read about near death experience. I hadn't heard about it. I like to go to a horror movie or zombie flick once in a while when I was a kid. But this is nothing I ever read up about. There was no 101 tutorial on YouTube for it, So it was a lot more shocking.
Mhm. Right, yeah, and how could you be prepared, especially back then?
No, you just weren't.
You mentioned something that I wanted to ask you more detail about. So
Mhm.
we'll get back to the near death experience for those watching, but I want to ask you about the different layers of reality that you
Mhm.
mentioned that the closer you get to source, they're more and more thought reactive.
Yeah, that was a kicker for me.
I have fantastic news. My intensive 8-week course, Alchemy, is relaunching again in September. I am opening the doors again. In Alchemy, I walk you through the step-by-step process to transform lower base heavy emotions into the gold of heart-opening consciousness expansion. You will learn to live in a state of flow, of giving and receiving abundance, joy, and bliss. Spots are filling up fast, so click here or check the description to have your entire life flipped upside down in the best way imaginable.
And you know what? I had guides with me. I had guides with me behind me. I could hear whispering. I was being led in a direction because I wasn't bright enough to ask, what do I do next? Or hadn't even thought. I mean, I was like a deer in the headlights. That was probably my expression. I had guides that were taking me through these places. I remember feeling the traveling that your body goes through, or your soul, or whatever you are goes through to get to through these different layers of dimension. It's like a really cool carnival ride. It feels like a huge rush. I loved it. That was the fun part of it. But I did have guides and I was shown different things. Would you like me to share one of them?
Yes, please.
Okay. I found myself at this place, like there wasn't any floor, but there had to be. And I still felt like me, like hands, legs and whatnot. So I'm looking over to one side and I see this great hall or the cathedral on the other, and it looked like planet Earth. And I thought, I hate heights. How am I doing this without panicking? Because I really hate heights. I don't go on a ladder well. I can't live on a go to a high rise. Okay. That looked like planet Earth. And I wasn't really sure. And then I was getting guided to this great cathedral. And it was like a structure. There was a structure and there was a whole line here and a line there of souls or people no longer alive, just kind of lined up, like you'd see in a closet. There was a masculine side, there was a feminine side. And someone was trying to explain to me as a rather dense teenager that these were my past lives as males, as females. Like it was very ordinary for them to be telling me, but I wasn't getting the message. It was just too abrupt. And I went over and I brushed my hands through and I saw a man, all white and not very good looking, like middle aged, kind of like dumpy. So, oh God, there's no way I was ever a man. Just no way. I don't believe this reincarnation stuff. And I went over the other side, and then there was this, and I've told this story before. There was this woman that I saw, and she just kind of was like ugly, crabby woman. She reminded me of this lunch monitor we had in Osceola Elementary, and she was just mean. And I just, I'm looking at it, and the idea of reincarnation and past lives didn't set well with me. It wasn't like I know I've been given this great gift and we should all be humble and sing kumbaya, but I wasn't feeling like that. I was not happy. I didn't like it. I don't want to be 13 again. I certainly don't want to come back unless I'm rich, fantastic looking, talented, and brilliant. Now then you can, deal me in. But if I can't have those things, I don't want to be a regular Joe Schmo. So I wasn't, and as soon as the lesson or the explanation happened, like boom, it was over. You don't get it, seconds, like you can't explore. Later, I was going through the dimensions, and that's when the good thing happened. That is when I went to source. That is as farther out I believe that you can go and never come back. Source, the origin. Not the origin of man or heaven, but I didn't feel like the arms and legs. I still felt me psychologically, but I think I may have been a point of consciousness. I don't know. And you're floating in a sea of love. And it's like a warm blanket around you. And there are other souls around you. And it's just bliss. And you're just like bursting and not into clouds. There was sun without having actual sun. There was light. And I was indescribable. I didn't want for anything. I didn't feel sad about anything. I didn't think about my life. It was a state of bliss. I can't really convey it. It was that cool. And that was that's the ultimate destination I'm taking. And it didn't last that long, but music came in, like floated in random, like waves. And I think that it's your origin, I'm guessing. And all of those souls that were with me were other aspects of myself. And as soon as I was able to kind of be at peace with it and like I was, digging it and I had kind of let go, it's over. And I'm not real happy about this because I'm just getting there and it's good. So imagine having the best feeling that you've ever experienced and you got no problems. Boom, that's over. And then I went backwards, and this is really weird and cool at the same time, backwards into this layer or the other dimensions closer to Earth. And I was on this beach. Now I grew up in a beach town, so this beach was beautiful. And there were these cliffs and there was windows where people were living in these cliffs. I know this sounds weird. Okay. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, people live here. Is this heaven? And if it is heaven, what about the tree of life? Because remember, I grew up a pretty religious. Just as I was thinking about the tree of life, a tree appeared right out of the ocean. You know where the sand's here and the waves are kind of here, right in the middle of the ocean. Not possible. Okay. And it was this beautiful pine tree. And it was like a luminous white, but you had like little mossy bark. It was really cool. And it was gorgeous. And I said, "Is that the tree of life?" And I knew it wasn't. But I knew, how did I get that there by just thinking of it? Well, now I can say it was thought responsive. But I was at this place and it was cool. And then, like I'm on this big fast tour, this carnival ride into the next life, and we just switch channels and gears, and I get pulled and yanked away from it, coming back closer to physical reality. Didn't seem fair.
Okay, so I have a couple questions going back to when you saw all your past lives with the masculine on one side and the feminine on another side. I heard you say in a previous interview that, like you just mentioned, you weren't cool with reincarnation and didn't want to think that you had been some of these other people, but you were given the information that you had to go back to this life because this life you're living now is the one where you would begin to, how did you word it? You would begin to wake up or,
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that. I'm kind of,
oh, no, I was just
um,
curious.
I knew I had to come back, or I got the info. This is the incarnation where my soul or whatever, I don't know, figures out the game. I don't know how to put it into words, becomes aware. I'm closer to being a last timer. I don't think I'm the last timer on this earth, but I'm getting closer because, and this incarnation is Lura Ketchledge. I woke up and I figured out how it works a little bit. It's like, I don't want to sit here and brag and say I know everything because, oh my gosh, I don't. I mean, I can't even set the clock on my VCR. Okay. So, but I kind of got 45 years of clues, including my near death experience, to kind of piece together non physical reality to the point where I know that I'm more than physical matter. I know there's an existence after physical death, and I'm certain of it. So it's not a belief, it's a known. And that was my purpose for coming back to figure it out.
So why do we have to live so many lives before we get to this point? Do you have
Oh,
any?
jeez, I don't know. Oh, man, I wish I did. I don't like, I mean, this is my theory. Now, I can be totally wrong, but really, Melissa, I think the soul comes into physical reality. It fractures into different personalities at different times in history. I think this all happens at once, and I think we learn all these valuable lessons in physical reality. We come out of physical reality, maybe have a big reunion or go back to source or something like that. I don't know what happens after that, but I know that the simplistic statement, everything happens for a reason, is really false. Bad things just happen sometimes, good things just happen. Our destiny can be subjective. But it's all of this. Think about, physical reality is the greatest teacher. How would you know if you were a soul that hadn't lived what sacrifice is? Look at the policeman that saves the little kid from being shot, or the fireman that runs into a burning building to save a family and dies. What about the mother who will give her starving children her last meal and die herself? What self-sacrifice is? If you don't experience it, you can't digest the meaning of these things. So there's some great valuable lesson that I'm not smart enough to figure out or really explain very well, but I kind of got a gut feeling how it works.
I love your honesty. And then I also wanted to ask you when you were in the light and
Mhm.
you mentioned that you saw all these other aspects of your soul in the light, I believe.
Guessing.
Okay. So you're guessing that's what that was. You mentioned, now correct me if I'm wrong, that the light that you saw wasn't the origin of everything, but it was at your origin? Or
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on that?
my source, my origin, I believe. I think there's so much beyond that that's incomprehensible to the human mind. I think you'd have to be a very evolved soul to even comprehend what happens. I think that they want the roadmap to the afterlife, to the A, B, C, and D equals G, something like that. I don't think that really exists. I think there's so much that we can't comprehend. But what I did get is learning that there is just a continuation. You go into your second body after this human body dies. You're still you, flaws and all. You might as well get it together while you're here because you're going to be taking your problems there when you go. You might as well try to do your best here. But, you know, I still stumble. I still do a lot of dumb things, and did it make me more enlightened? No, I just got a little bit more information than somebody who hasn't had a near death experience.
Thank you for sharing. It's a really interesting idea that we could each be our own source or have our own source. Maybe that's what some people call the higher self.
It is higher self. Yes, it
Mhm.
is higher self going to you. Yeah, it is.
All right. So I think we left off after you, let's see, you went to the source, and then where did you go after that?
Well, I went to that place closer to physical reality that was
Yes.
thought responsive. And, and then I came back to my grandfather, and we were standing in this place, and it was all this mauve color. It was very close to physical reality. It was very mauve, and I had to come back, and I wasn't a good sport about it. Imagine a 2-year-old having a tantrum. Multiply it by 1,000 and you're a teenager. I was not happy about it. And I said to my grandfather, "This has been so long, this lesson, this intensity." And as I was talking to him, I felt there was more epiphanies, there was more to it. I felt lessons, things that I had been shown, things started to be taken away. And I was mentally trying to hold on to them. And so much was being taken away out of my consciousness before I came back. I was very upset about it. And I still don't understand why that happened. But when I came back, I was hurt. I had a broken nose, a broken finger. There wasn't anything in me that wasn't bruised, banged up, or strained. I woke up into a significant amount of pain. And I know a lot of time had passed because there was a car down in the field and the owner of the stable was there and she was all worried and she was calling my mom. And the two gentlemen that saved my life, and I guess resuscitated me, I didn't feel any love or gratitude for. I mean, I feel bad about it now. I'd like to say thank you. Sorry, I was a bitch. But, and I wasn't terrible to them, but I just looked around the field and I was back and I was sad. And I just said, this is not reality. And I was distressed. And then on the way to the hospital, I passed out. Didn't leave my body, but I passed out. I was unconscious again. And I went to the hospital, which was a whole bunch of joy. When I tried to tell the doctor about what happened, he asked me what drugs I was on and he shamed me. My mom was there. She was an RN that actually worked at the hospital and she was all upset. And the doctors, he just like a light switch was caring and then went to cold when I tried to tell him about my near death experience.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so sad.
Well, it was sad because I was 19. Even if I had been crazy or on drugs, he should have been nicer about it. And
Right.
then just basically wanted to pole vault me out of the hospital. My mother said she had a head injury. She stopped breathing. You've got to admit her. And this doctor did not coddle the drug user. Now, he never did a panel on me. If he had, he would have saw the only thing that was in my system was a little caffeine from a Coca-Cola. That was it. But back then, these doctors were like little Hitlers sometimes and demigods when they were in the ER. And He just thought I was taking drugs and didn't want to bother with me, and my mom had to check me for hours to make sure my brain wasn't bleeding. It was a whole big to-do. It took me 12 hours to calm down. In fact, when my mom was taking me home, we were in Maryfield at this intersection. I started to get out to the intersection because I had to go find my grandfather. I had to go back. I couldn't tell you how hard it was to be back, and it wasn't the head injury. It was the shock to be in the non-physical world and then back to the physical world. I didn't take it well. I just didn't.
I've heard that a lot of people have had a really hard time with transitioning back. Were you able to find anybody to talk to about it? I mean, obviously now you're sharing, but it's been
Oh, I didn't talk about it for over 30 years. I had the courage to go to a therapist, and I wanted to talk to her about try to tell her what happened, and she shamed me. And then I was like, I mean, I didn't talk about it at all after that. I finally worked up the courage to talk to my grandmother when I was 24. And she told me things, and oh, I wish I'd heard it earlier. Oh my gosh, I wish I'd heard earlier. She said that her mother had the gift, and one of her brothers, and her son. And then she told me all of these things that my great grandmother could do and how she had insights. And I'd only wished I heard about it a lot earlier. And then I talked to my sister about it and my mom, and that was it. I talked to a therapist at 25 who pointed me in the direction of Robert Monroe's books. And when I read his books, I was like, oh God, thank you. I understood what it was. And then I didn't have to read anymore. I didn't want to pursue it. I just had a better understanding about out of body and near death. But, I had all these dreams and all these things that happened afterwards, and they just like were in my mind, tumbling and tumbling in my late 20s. So I started writing stuff down. And somehow I just couldn't stop. And that morphed into writing some novels. I've used the vehicle of fiction to really tell my story and to get it out. It was cathartic. I kind of needed to. I needed to talk about reincarnation. I needed to talk about near death experience. I needed to talk about how you flip flop and your whole foundation, the core of you, is just so changed. You can never go back to being what you were, nor would you want to. And then you're going to like this. Okay, I'm 50 years old. I go to this writer's market. I said, well, I'm writing about near death experience and blah, blah, blah. So this guy says to me, well, ma'am, you know, you're over 50. You've never published. No one, and they're going to Google your name, the publishers, and they're going to see you've done nothing with your career, and they're not going to read you, and you'll never be published.
Oh, wow.
Don't say never to me, because that is just not in my vocabulary. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to have some fun with this. And it was the first time after 50, you're not so worried about your image. If you put your foot in your mouth in the radio, if you look like a klutz, or you're overweight, or you're this or you're that, you know what? The embarrassment gene fades with time. So I wrote some stuff, a funny ad about selling my house, about ghosts included but not guaranteed, and wrote about, some of the visitations. And then I thought, I'll just put it on eBay. What's more American? So I did this, and then radio stations and networks came to me, and then they were just all trying to debunk me. And I said, bring it on. I'm going to have a good time with this. A little sense of humor always helps. And then I was just being really honest. And it was so freeing to finally talk. Yes, I had a near-death experience. Yes, I've had some weird, random psychic phenomena. Yes, I have seen spirits from time to time, but they didn't give me the lotto number. So I had some fun with it, and I was kind of able to be free and to be me. And it's been wonderful. The thing I really wanted to say most is that I had nobody to talk to. I told you that when after my near-death experience, the isolation and the silence was deafening. So if I can, reach one or two people, tell them about my story, and they realize, hey, she doesn't have a 1-800 number. She can't channel your aunt for $50. That's not my angle in life. Yeah, I write some books. I want to sell books, but I kind of want to get it out to put a human face on a near death experience and how it affected me. And, if you've had one, goodness, you're not alone.
Well, Laura, thank you so much for being willing to share now. After everything that you've been through, I know a lot of people will benefit from your message. Before you go, I would love to ask you, is this reality that we're in? Well, I mean, this isn't reality, like you said when you woke up, but is this
Yeah,
realm that we're in, is it thought reactive like the others?
not really. It's intention reactive a little bit. You put
Interesting.
good intentions. No, I'm not saying like let's hold hands and sing kumbaya because that is so not me. I don't believe the dog down the street is sending me a message or the universe has a plan or anything like that. I'm not one of I don't believe in UFOs, Bigfoot, or any of that. But what I do believe is sort of like do no harm. It's so important. I can't put a word on it or explain it really well. You don't ever in this life want to interfere in somebody else's destiny. You don't want to trip them up in their own path, their own spiritual journey and their life's journey. Basically, you don't want to screw anybody up because that is a big, big no no. And there are consequences for that. The guy that beats up his wife and tells her she's no good and demoralize her. That's really a horrible thing to do, far more than you can ever imagine. Messing up somebody's destiny. We all have a certain destiny. I don't know my total plan. I do know the fact that, when I was young, I was diagnosed with autoimmune disease and very, very ill and nearly died a couple of times. It was comforting to me to know that I had this near death experience while I was going through this life's crisis. So if I bought the farm, at least I knew I wasn't going to end. That helped me out a little bit. But I always have more questions than answers at the end of the day. I always wonder, well, like, why me? There was this wonderful miracle for me. Why not my sister? She died at 41. I don't think we get all the information, but I do think it's really important if you open up to the idea of near death experience and you listen to a few other podcasts that you're doing. I'm saying this to the folks who are your listeners, to open up your mind to the possibilities. I think it's quite liberating and I think there's some serious comfort in it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Laura, I would love to give you a chance to share with the viewers where they can find you.
Well, if you go to Lura Ketch, LURAKETCH.com, there's links to my interviews and my own podcast on near death experience. But with my books, Near Death Connection, Throwaway Horses, Reincarnation Connection, I really explain the laws of the non-physical world using a good mystery. There's always a good murder mystery in there, a love and romance. But about 85-90% of it, I really explain the afterlife, astral projection, reincarnation, near-death experience, precognition. I'm even going to put some remote viewing into my next book, The Near-Death Conclusion. But I was able to, it was cathartic to write about my paranormal experiences and use fiction to do it. But thank
That's
you so
really
much.
creative. Yeah.
Thank you so much, for letting me be a part of the show and get to converse with you. And I just think you're doing a fabulous job
Oh,
with the
thank you so
podcast.
much.
You're helping a lot of people because, Melissa, it's a very scary thing to have an NDE and not have anywhere to turn that
Oh,
there's
yeah.
logical people that make common sense. You
Mhm.
know, the problem with like the quote paranormal, it attracts the wackadoos
Mhm.
as well as very grounded people that are trying to learn. But you have a very common sense show without preaching, and I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
I appreciate that feedback. And thank you for being willing to share your story and put everything out there and the work you're doing with, like, just putting your experiences into fiction. That's going to reach people who would not listen to a show like this.
I hope so. What I tried to do is have something entertaining, but I really wanted to show how things worked. And it was so, you can do, you're so much braver when you have a character, you know?
Yeah.
But all the, and the villains kind of get theirs. You'll enjoy that too. But it was a way to explain it as best I could.
Wonderful. Well, I'll have the links in the description. And thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. You have a great day.
You too.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.